never been ill. My spine bones being crushed. He said they were spongy. If I turned my head, I would feel the contractions. If I tried to stand up, it was almost impossible to stand up, but if I tried to stand up, they would become worse.
Life is fond of throwing stones on the path of unsuspecting persons, and Kemi Ajai's story was no different. Narrating her ordeal, Kemi tells the story of how she just wouldn't give up, finding strength even in her weakest time.
So it wasn't comfortable, it was never comfortable, but I was determined to fight it.
Giving up is said to be easy, but fighting to live is otherwise. Kemi's story beams love, so much pain, and courage in the face of such pain. This is her story. This is Spotlight.
So I'm Kemi Ajai, HR practitioner. I'm a Christian wife, mother of 3. I got back from a journey and I recalled that that period I was trying to tidy up the entire house because I felt everywhere was dirty, and I would spend hours way into the night cleaning the entire house, and I just thought it was fatigue from that activity. And on a particular Saturday, I think I did way too much work, and sometime at about noon I just realized that the pain was, almost unbearable. It didn't seem like normal pain anymore. So I think I mentioned it to my husband, and he said, okay, maybe you need to rest, and then I went to rest, maybe took Panadol or something. But even over the weekend, on Sunday, it didn't get so much better. My first reaction, of course, as a Christian, I prayed about it, and then I went to the hospital on Monday, and they did a couple of tests. Yeah, but I think a particular figure that the doctor had concern that, she felt that that figure was extremely high. According to her, that the figure was supposed to be somewhere between 0 and 5, but the readings she was getting on that particular blood test was over 150, or somewhere between 140 and 150. So based on that, she decided to carry out further investigations, and she ran, I was supposed to run quite a number of tests, just to at least determine why that figure was that high. And then she did so many tests, and all the tests came back negative for everything that was tested at the time, except that particular reading, I think it's the ESR. Yeah, so that reading was quite high. So at that point she said, okay, it was a private clinic, and it was quite expensive, for me to keep going and running these tests there. So she said, okay, maybe what she would do is to refer me to a government hospital or something, so that the price of the tests and consultation wouldn't be so high. So I said that was fine. And I think somewhere in between, somewhere along the line, I started going to, the other hospital. It must have been 2 months after that. Maybe I cut my finger, and I developed maybe an infection, and I was admitted into the hospital. Now, as this was going on, I noticed that the pain didn't necessarily calm down. It kept going. It seemed to get worse over the next few months. So it went worse, and but I was quite optimistic. I was determined that, regardless of the fact that I was feeling a lot of pain, whatever it was, I would overcome it. I didn't think it was anything to be worried about. I just thought, oh, regular pain. So I had that infection and I was admitted to some hospital nearby, and they were treating me maybe for malaria and some infection. But during that period, I recall that on a particular morning, I had this appointment to go and run some more tests, because all this period I was running tests almost every week. When I do a few tests, I'll be told, oh, okay, based on the findings from that test, I need to do a few more tests. And then I will do those tests and they will say, okay, based on the findings from this test, I need to do a few more tests. So in between that period was when I got admitted to the hospital for the infection and malaria. So I was in the hospital and then I had to go out from the admission to go and run some tests. On this particular morning, I was trying to stand up from the hospital bed because the hospital bed in the particular hospital was not very comfortable. So I tried to get up from the bed and it was quite difficult to get up from the bed. I think in the process of trying to finally force myself out of the bed, something seemed to go wrong in my back, and I noticed that I just suddenly fell down. I can't explain what kind of fall it was, but I know that I fell. But as usual, I didn't think anything of it. So I went for the test at some diagnostic center. So I got there and I was in the waiting area on this day, and all of a sudden I wanted to stand up from the chair in the waiting area, and I noticed that I kept falling down. I would stand and I would fall down, and I went alone because there was nothing seriously wrong. So I didn't have anybody accompany me. So other patients and the people that came with them assisted me to make sure that I was at least able to run the test. But it was really bad because I didn't even know what was happening at that time. I just know that I kept falling down. That was probably the first time that they got me a wheelchair because I couldn't help myself anymore in that center. So they got me a wheelchair to move me around from one test station to the next station, and that went on for a while. I think eventually I had to call my husband and I told him, well, it appears I can't really walk anymore. So he came and he helped me, and I left the center then and I went back on admission. Maybe a day or two afterwards I was discharged. But from that period, walking became, increasingly extremely difficult. It was just difficult to walk. It was difficult to stand up from my bed. It was difficult to stand up from a chair. It was difficult to move around just from that period. By the time I went back to the hospital, I was seeing a neurologist then. By the time I went back there, he just was like, oh, okay, so you mean you kept falling? I said I kept falling. I didn't know what was wrong. So he said, what was the issue? I said, I don't know. All I knew was that I was falling down. There was no diagnosis. I think he just said, okay, you need to do a few more tests, which was always the case. And I think in that hospital, I get appointments maybe every month or every 2 weeks or something like that. So it's not like when I feel anything, I can go into the hospital. So it got really bad. I think after he sent me on the next couple of tests, between that time and the next 2 weeks when I was to go to the hospital for a review, I may have completely stopped walking. I couldn't walk anymore in between that period. In fact, at that time, I was a bit concerned that if I was to go back to the hospital, I wouldn't even be able to get out of the car and get into the doctor's office. I recall then that the flight of stairs, here in my house, at this time it takes me maybe 30 seconds to go downstairs, but then it used to take like 30 minutes for me to go from upstairs down or from downstairs up, and I couldn't walk anymore, so I was pretty much in the house most of the time. I was actually waiting for my next appointment in the hospital. The family friend called and asked that, oh, I haven't been seeing you in church, I hope everything is okay. And I said, well, I'm not really feeling fine. So he came around and he visited with us and said, oh, why don't you see this other neurologist? So I went to Marigold at the time, to see Dr. Ojo at Marigold. And from the very moment I discussed with him, first of all, he looked at all my previous tests. It was on a Saturday. He looked at all the previous tests I had done and said, oh, nothing really looks out of place here, because I had done tests over maybe 4 months. No, maybe close to 5 months at that time. So he said, nothing looks out of place. Maybe you just need to do some physiotherapy or, something. And I said, okay. And we were about to leave the hospital. So I mentioned to him that I have this one more set of tests that I was to do. I think it was a CT scan. I had done the MRI before and several other blood tests. I said, this one more test, I haven't yet given it to the neurologist at the other hospital. Maybe I should just show you, because I was to go back to the hospital the following week. So he said, okay, let me have a look at it. And when he had a look at it, I just noticed that his countenance changed a bit, and I was like, okay. And then he said, that this looks a bit more serious than just something for which I would require physiotherapy. That he would share the information with some other colleague in the hospital, and he would, let me know what his colleague feels. So I said, okay, that's fine. Well, he said, well, from what he's seen, he mentioned something about my spine my spine bones being crushed. He said they were spongy, and things like that. And then he also mentioned that I shouldn't have been standing or sitting upright as I had been doing, or forcing myself to do that. I actually should have been either lying down or sitting down at an angle that didn't put pressure on my spine. And of course I didn't know all that. I didn't have that information before. So I was told that okay, he would see his colleague, who I eventually found out would be Dr. Adelabu in Marigold. He said he would discuss with his colleague, and by Monday he would give me a feedback on what the way forward was. So I said, okay, so that was fine. On that day, I recall that by the time I got back home, I actually couldn't climb the steps back up again. And our family friend, Mr. Ibrahim, he had to get me a wheelchair. So they used the wheelchair to bring me upstairs. But from Saturday to Sunday, I think my body started to experience spasms. I didn't even know what it was at the time. It just felt like contractions. So at best, I said I felt I was feeling contractions. And the contractions would go on. If I moved just a bit, I would feel the contractions. If I turned my head, I would feel the contractions. If I tried to stand up, it was almost impossible to stand up, but if I tried to stand up, they would become worse. The only position that seemed to be fair was if I just lay down in one place, which I had pretty much adjusted to doing, because I also noticed that when I didn't move, I was more comfortable. I think prior to then, there was a period that I just stayed in one place for close to 1 week. But after then, I got, I think we called and arrangements were made, and I was admitted into the hospital by Monday. after my appointment with the neurosurgeon on Saturday, I was admitted on Monday, and almost immediately, I think from the very day I got into the hospital, I thought I was going to have some time to rest or recover, but they conducted series of tests, while I was in the hospital, and if I to recall clearly, I'm sure almost immediately, they determined that I had a blood condition, and they started treatment almost immediately, and the spasms continued, the pain continued for a while, but after a while I started to improve, and it got better from there. When I was on admission, first of all, before then, I actually couldn't do anything anymore, because I was more or less confined to my bed, which was complete opposite of what I would love to do. So I was confined to my bed, I was confined to my room. I didn't have any social activity anymore. My only social activity was probably watching TV on my phone. So I pretty much couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to church physically, but of course I could participate in church services online. So it affected everything that I do, and of course combined with the fact that it wasn't just a case that I was just at home. It was a case that I was at home and I was in intense pain. Sometimes I tell people that the kind of pain I felt at that time, that I've had 3 children, but combine the 3 labors together in one. That was the extent of the pain I was feeling at that time. So it was a painful experience. I couldn't, the pain takes away from an individual's productivity. So I wasn't as productive as I would have loved to be at that time. That's always been my own position, that okay, I'm going to get better. So I had that at the back of my mind. Of course, as a Christian, I go to church, I confess the word of God. I mentioned it to my pastor. She prayed with me, and then she told me, why don't you, she told me, listen to these messages. There were also some confessions from the word of God that she said, you should do this, take it as a program of faith, take it as something that, because I recall something that I was told then, that hey, conditions like this, they don't come and go, they come and they don't go. It's more or less like the condition was meant to completely maybe take me out or something like that. So it was something that I had to fight. So I feel that at that point, I also realized that, I have a lot to fight for. I have a family, I have children, and I must fight this. So it wasn't comfortable, it was never comfortable, but I was determined to fight it. I was determined to fight it, whatever it was. My family remains very supportive, okay, so I have my immediate family, and then I also have my sisters and all. Of course, at the time I was going through all this, my children, of course, I had just one of my children who was at home at that time. So he didn't quite understand what was happening, because I think it was the first time he was seeing me ill. I have never been ill, So it was the first time, so it was a bit confusing for him. But in whatever way he could support, he would help me to get things. My husband, of course, was, extremely supportive. My siblings, my mom, they were all supportive throughout the period that I was at home, before I got admitted to the hospital. I recall when I was in the hospital, I was told that, I would have to remain in one position for a period of time, that, because there was a concern that maybe there had been some injury to my spine. So the doctor said, okay, why don't you just, we're going to give it a try, stay in one position, immobile, I'm not too sure of, the exact terms, but, I was not supposed to move for a period of time, and I did that. I run my own consulting business, and through the period I found that I couldn't attend to business anymore. I had to completely, I had people that were doing some aspects of the business, but there were some aspects of the business that required my physical presence. So for that period, I had to suspend operations in that area. Yeah, I couldn't carry on with physically being present. But of course, that's something which a number of people said, that, oh, we didn't have the feeling that you were ill. So they didn't know, because on phone, of course, I sounded normal. There was nothing wrong with my voice. So in areas where I needed to simply make calls, I would make calls. But in terms of being physically present, I wasn't physically present at a number of engagements. I had to suspend those for a period of time. Yeah, and then I kept, trying to get better. I think somewhere in between, I traveled for further treatments. That was after I started working. Yeah, I started working. I think at some point the condition was better controlled while I was still in Nigeria. So I traveled for further treatments, and I got better. And by the time I got back to Nigeria, that was about a year, just over a year ago now. The pain had almost completely subsided. At a point I was working with, at some point I had to use the wheelchair. I have to return that wheelchair, actually. Yeah. So at some point I was using a wheelchair, and at some other point I graduated from the wheelchair, to using a stick. Yeah. So I used that stick for maybe over a year, but at some point also I had to use a back brace to control the pain. I don't know if it's a full back brace or a full body brace. I was using that for a couple of months, but over time I don't have any use for all those items anymore.